If you've ever looked at a fuse board quote, or maybe an electrician has mentioned changing your board, there is a good chance that you have heard the terms RCD and RCBO, and you've probably thought, right, I have no idea what that means, but I'm guessing that one of them costs more than the other. And to be fair, that's usually the bit that people care about first, is the cost. And that's not because they don't care about safety, because of course everybody wants everything to be safe, but it's because if you are not an electrician, these are just random letters that get thrown at you and you're expected to somehow know which option is better and safer for your house. So I wanted to do this video because this is one of the many questions that I get asked by my clients, and it sounds technical, but once it's explained properly, it's actually quite simple and straightforward. And if you are currently trying to decide whether you should have an RCD board or an RCBO board fitted inside of your home, then what I want to do here is to clarify all of the differences in a way that actually makes sense, and also tell you what I would always recommend and why. Now, if you're a new viewer here, welcome. My name's Ryan from Sparks Will Fly Electrical, and I am an electrician that works in and around predominantly the London area, and I make these videos so homeowners just like you can understand what they are actually paying for and what's actually worth doing with regards to electrical upgrades inside of their homes without any of the technical jargon or the confusing nonsense and fluff added in. And if you live in London or the surrounding areas and you want to get a quote for a consumer unit upgrade or a fuse board upgrade or an EV charger or any type of electrical work inside of your home, you can get in touch with me by clicking the link. It should be somewhere on your screen now, and if not, as always, it's also down in the video description. Right, let's talk about RCDs and RCBOs. The simplest way to think about it is this. An RCD will protect a group of circuits together, and an RCBO will protect each circuit individually. That is really the core difference. Now, obviously, there's a bit more to it than that. There's a bit more technicality to it, but if you can understand that one point, you're pretty much most of the way there. So hypothetically, let's say that you have got a traditional split load consumer unit with RCD protection. What that usually means is that you will have multiple circuits that sit together under the protection of a single RCD. So maybe you have, let's say, the upstairs socket circuit, the downstairs lighting circuit, or kitchen appliances, outside sockets, whatever it may be, they will be grouped together under one side of your board and protected by a single RCD. RCD stands for residual current device, for any of you that are wondering. And if there is a fault on one of those circuits or something trips on your RCD, then everything on that side of your house, or on side of the board I should say, will go off together. That's the bit that people don't always love about RCDs, because from a homeowner's point of view, it's very annoying. Okay, you can plug something faulty in outside, let's say, and then suddenly half of your house goes dark. Or let's say for argument's sake, you've got a nuisance trip somewhere and now you are trying to work out which of the several circuits has actually caused that nuisance trip. Now, this is where RCBOs come into play, and RCBO stands for residual circuit breakers with overprotection. Again, in case you were wondering. With an RCBO board, each individual circuit has its own level of protection. So if there is a fault on, let's say, the kitchen socket circuit, only that circuit will deactivate and go off. Okay, the rest of your house will stay on, all singing, all dancing. If there is a problem with, let's say, an outside socket somewhere, again, that is the only circuit that will trip and deactivate. You will not lose a load of unrelated circuits along with it. And from a practical point of view, that is usually the much better setup, okay? Not just because it's more convenient, but because fault finding also becomes easier too. So if one circuit trips, you know exactly where the problem is going to be. You're not all of a sudden going to be trying to guess which one of the 4, 5, 6 different circuits underneath an RCD have caused the issue. Now, for a normal homeowner, that is usually the biggest benefit of having RCBOs. It's not that the board suddenly becomes magical or 10 times safer in every possible way. It's just that the protection is more individual, it's more controllable, and it's a lot less annoying in day-to-day use. And personally, for any of my jobs these days, if I'm doing a consumer unit upgrade, I will only install RCBO boards. I won't install RCDs anymore. And the reason for that is quite simple. It's just a better setup. It's tidier from a fault protection point of view. It usually is a lot less hassle for the customers long term. And again, if something goes wrong, if there are any faults or issues further on down the line, it tends to affect only one individual circuit rather than half the house, and it's much easier to identify that fault should one occur. Now, having said all of that, that doesn't mean that an RCD board is automatically bad. I want to be clear about that, because it isn't. I mean, I think sometimes people hear RCBO and they assume that everything else is rubbish. That's not the case at all, okay? There are tens of thousands of homes in this country out there right now with split load RCD boards, and they will work absolutely fine and they're completely safe. If it is installed properly, if it's tested properly, and if it suits the installation, it's not like your house is unsafe all of a sudden just because you've got an RCD protected board rather than RCBOs. But if you are asking me as an electrician what I have in my own home and what I always install for my customers and always recommend to my customers who are having a board change right now, then yeah, as of right now, I will always choose an RCBO board setup. Because in all honesty, it's just the more modern, better thought out arrangement in this day and age as of filming this, as of right now. Now, one of the reasons that this question comes up so much is because of the price point, because an RCBO board usually costs more than a simple RCD setup. And again, people want to know whether it's actually worth the extra bit of money. My view on the issue is as follows. If you are already going to the expense of changing the fuse board, it usually makes sense to do it properly and not try to save a relatively small amount of money on something that is going to affect how your entire electrical installation inside of your home behaves for the next half a century. Because the difference in cost between the two setups is usually a lot smaller than the difference in convenience over the next 4 or 5 decades. Okay, that's the way that I see it, that's the way that I look at it. People will spend tens of thousands on kitchens, on bathrooms, on flooring, on decorating, on all of this fancy stuff inside of their home that they can see, and fair enough, everybody wants to have a beautiful home. But when it comes to the fuse board, which is literally controlling and protecting everything electrical inside of your home, suddenly people want to shave every single pound off of it that they can. Make that make sense. So, to me it doesn't, but I suppose because it's out of sight, it's out of mind, and people just want to get the best deal possible because they can't see anything extra for the extra money that they're going to be spending. I just don't think it's the smartest place in order to cut corners. That's my opinion on it. Now, one thing that I should say here, because it matters, is that people sometimes confuse tripping with my board is bad, it's a bad board. It's not always the board. If your electrics are tripping all the time, sometimes the board is part of the issue, especially if it's an older setup or if it's really poor. But often, more often than not, especially with newer boards, it's just the board doing its job and it's highlighting a fault somewhere else on a circuit. So if you've got nuisance tripping and you're looking into an upgrade, one of the nice things about RCBOs is that they can make it much easier to narrow down where any issue on any particular circuit may be. Because instead of losing one whole side of a board, you're only going to lose the affected circuit by itself. And that alone will save you a lot of time and frustration later on, especially if you have to call an electrician in and they have to do a fault find. Another question that my clients will consistently ask me is whether or not RCBOs are safer than RCDs. And the honest answer is no, okay? It's not just as simple as saying that one is safe and one isn't, because both of them are protective devices. They're there in order to make sure that you are safe and that you're not going to get a potentially life-threatening electric shock. The main benefit with the RCBO that I've highlighted already is that each circuit has its own combined level of protection so that you get better separation and less disruption if there ever is a problem further on down the line. That's really the practical win here from installing RCBOs. And from my point of view as an electrician, it also just makes the board nicer to work with and easier to understand when each circuit is individually separated and protected. Now, where this is going to get relevant for the homeowners is when they're getting quotes for a fuse board or consumer unit upgrade, because sometimes you will get one quote that's much cheaper and another one that's more expensive, and part of the reason is the specification of the board that is being installed, that you're being quoted for. One quote might be based around a more basic RCD split load arrangement, and another might be based around an all singing, all dancing RCBO setup with surge protection or AFDD devices also included, and a much better all and more expensive spec. And if you don't know what those differences mean, then all you're going to see is one number being much higher than the other, and you're going to naturally think, well, I might as well go with the cheaper quote. Why am I going to pay somebody else more money to do the exact same thing? So if you are watching this and you're comparing quotes that you've received, I want you to ask the question, is the board that you're being quoted for RCD protected or RCBO protected? Because that will tell you a lot about what you are actually being quoted for. And again, I'm not saying that the more expensive quote is always right. That's not always the case. But what I am saying is that one electrician may be quoting for a board with RCBO protection and another one is quoting for a more basic RCD setup, then they're not going to be quoting like for like in terms of price. And that is why just comparing the total figure by itself doesn't always tell you the entire picture, the entire story. So the simple version, if I was to try and summarize this entire video in one sentence, is an RCD protects a group of circuits together and an RCBO protects circuits individually. And in most homes, in fact in almost every situation, in my opinion, RCBOs make for a better, more convenient setup. Now, if you are thinking about changing your own fuse board or consumer unit, I should say, and if you're not sure what you should be going for, or let's say that you've had a quote or two and you don't know whether it actually makes sense, you can use the form on screen now or down below in the video description if you are living in London or the surrounding areas, and then I can give you a realistic idea of what I would recommend for your home, and I can also give you a quote if you would like one from me. I hope you found this video helpful. If you did, please hit the like button, subscribe, share it with all of your friends, and I will see you again in the next one. Until next time, take care.